Welcome to the UFC, to the former Jungle Fights flyweight champ. It's Natalia Silva, set to make her UFC debut. Years on the shelf, she's set to take on Dana White's Contender Series and recently a UFC winner in Canada's Jasmine Jasudavicius. And Matt, I had a lot of fun going back, watching a lot of tape study for this fight for Jasudavicius, her UFC debut. Early on this year, she takes on Kay Hansen. Hansen jumping up from strawweight to flyweight to take that fight. And Jasudavicius stuffed every single thing that Kay Hansen is good at. And she was able to get the win and send Kay Hansen packing. So good for Jasmine Jasudavicius in that one. Jasudavicius, challenge for the CFFC title back some time ago. That was her last loss. If you do look at the 4 on in, that was her only loss. It was almost 2 years ago. Split decision loss to Elise Reed, who is now also in the UFC. But for Jasudavicius, I mean, I went back through 2016 Canada Cup wrestling medalist was she. She won silver and realistically got into MMA a little bit late. Her wrestling coach, Chris Prickett, was going over to PEI to hang out with Jason Sago. Everything really fit like a glove. She has some fights as an amateur, has some fights as a pro, and I get it. She is just turned 33, so she's a little bit older, but not a lot of miles on the clock for Jasudavicius. Now, in taking on Natalia Silva, this is somebody with plenty of finish wins, and if you do look at it, and this is my biggest point, Matt, of her last 7 wins, 6 of them by armbar. You don't necessarily see that working at the elite level. It worked for Ronda Rousey. Doesn't work for everybody else, though. But for Silva, plenty of finish wins on her plate. You do look at her last fight. It was to win that Jungle Fights title. It was against Joyce Mara back 2 years and 4 months ago. It's interesting to note that Silva was signed to the UFC in 2020. She was booked to fight in 2021 against Victoria Leonardo. She broke her ulna, so I'll throw the picture up there on screen. But she hasn't stepped into a cage in 2 years and 4 months. It's been a long time away. She is just 25 years old. So this could be a case where she comes in and she's like a Melissa Gatto and she's added every tool to her belt and she's a great striker now. But Matt, for Natalia Silva, a very interesting fighter coming to the UFC.
And here's the thing too, for every Melissa Gatto, there's also an Ariane Lipski who their highlight reel looks really good. We hear about all these great things that they've done outside the UFC. And then they show up and they're extremely underwhelming. And that's kind of my question with Silva in this matchup. Because it's not like Jasmine Jasudavicius is like a borderline ranked fighter by any stretch of the imagination. But she is a fighter who is complete in her skill set. She can strike a little bit. She can definitely wrestle. She has a good gas tank. And those are really the 3 most important things to bring into the cage. I'll be very interested to see if Silva can keep up with the... And I'm going to say this with a bit of an asterisk. Jasmine Jasudavicius is the more experienced fighter in this matchup. I do believe so. I know she has less fights, but if you do look at her whole career as a mixed martial artist and span how long she's been in wrestling, in boxing, in kickboxing, in MMA training, I do think she's been around the sport for a much longer time. And like you said, she's someone who fought in CFFC, which is a fairly highly ranked organization. We don't normally look at former CFFC fighters and think, wow, who were they?
Chukagian's former CFFC champ.
Exactly, and she's the forever number 2 at the flyweight division, one of the all-time greats. I just think for Silva, this is going to be a fight that's going to either prove a lot of people wrong and really catapult her, not into title contention, but you get the idea, just get a lot more eyes on her career, or it's going to be the you are not a contender and you are a pretender, because if she can't defend those takedowns early from Jasmine in this fight, I do not think she's going to be able to get back up to her feet.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You look at Jasmine Jasudavicius, when she's going to fight her fight, she's really standing up boxing range, working her strikes, moving her head, and then when the fight gets back behind that black line before the cage, she's able to control head position, she's able to work her takedowns. They will be more traditional. When you look at Natalia Silva and she strikes, and I did this I wish I could do like some Luke Thomas type things here, but basically I watched a lot of plant your feet, throw from your hips, throw like your work. It's almost like she's working a brush cutter and she's trying to trim the hedges. Like she's throwing from here. She completely throws striking defense out the window. And I went back and watched one of her fights. You can find a lot of tape on Natalia Silva. The fight that she had against Ingrid Panda. In that one, it looks like the canvas is a bed sheet. It was just white and like kind of draped there. But in that one, she has one of those moments where she plants and throws. And again, she's only like 21 in that fight. The fight that she had over at Jungle Fights to win the title, she's only like 23, 22. So very, very young in her career. I do expect a progression, but when you look at that fight against Panda, she gets completely crumpled and dropped and falls back. But the weird thing about it is, when we look at Jasudavicius, more, I guess, technical when it comes to her takedowns. For Natalia Silva, she's a very, very good grappler. And once it gets down to the mat, she is very fluid in the positions that she's good at. But when she goes for her own takedowns, it's a lot of body lock into a trip, or maybe she'll go for a judo throw, which works. And I mean, strawweight, flyweight, Montserrat Conejo was able to completely negate anything that Cheyenne Vlismas was good at, because she had a good head and arm throw and could keep her head tight in that position. But when I look at Natalia Silva, she wins this weekend, it would surprise me. I'll put it that way.
Does Natalia Silva have broads in Atlanta?
I don't
know. No. Come on.
I don't know.
I like Jasmine in this fight. I do. I just think her forward pressure is really going to be the key. Because like you said, in the middle of the cage, she will strike at range. But the second it does start to get close to the cage, she's someone who will close that distance very fast and will really play the striking game from that point. I like her cardio in this fight. And I do like her ability to chain wrestle a little bit. She will struggle to do that against anybody with like a legitimate wrestling background. But I do think in this matchup, she will be able to get the fight to the mat consistently.
Jasudavicius, another one of these bigger favorites. We're going to sound like broken records here for a bit, but she opened to minus 260, minus 257, thereabouts. Natalia Silva opened plus 220, plus 215, or thereabouts. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprised us, though, as they might be to you. I'm going to say over under 80% Jasudavicius.
I'll say under.
Going to say under. It's slightly over. 869 total votes, 82% Jasudavicius, 90% by decision for the 18% that have Silva, 47% by submission. I mean, again, for Silva, it looks like, she's throwing lemons from her hips. She has good kicks. She will switch stances a lot, but it feels like a lot of wasted movement. She is light on the balls of her feet, so there is another positive. So if she has kind of made these improvements over the last 2 years, I'm very excited to see them. Again, she was signed in 2020 by the UFC, and she took all of these fights. You look at it right now, 12-5 with a draw. From 2015 to 2019, that's a lot of fights in 4 years. So again, a lot of time off now. You can kind of reset. The level of competition that she took on, maybe not the best out of the wins, but out of the losses, Marina Rodrigues, the real one. And then a loss to Diana Firmino, who's on a lot of people's record as well, especially when you're coming up through that Brazilian regional scene. But again, for me, I do like Jasudavicius here.
So do I. And for Natalia Silva, let's say she does look good in a loss, then maybe it will kind of correct what I think about her. But like you said, on her record, a lot of her wins are over subpar levels of competition, if we're all being honest. So she does have quite a bit to prove in this fight, in my mind at least.
It'll be an interesting fight. Can Natalia Silva kind of take some of that energy that we saw from Karina Silva, who just made her UFC debut and got a big win over Poliana Batalio? Or will she look like a fighter whose wins were a combined 11-7 overall, and then you factor in the 10-5 her last time out against Mara? It'll be an interesting fight nonetheless. Both of us going with Canada's own Jasmine Jasudavicius to get the win. We get some big-time fights left on this card, including Tim Means taking on Kevin Holland. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.